And recorded. And welcome, everybody. It's Monday, December 29, 2025, and this is season 4, episode 37 of Two Guys on Politics, which is broadcast on the U.S. Arab Radio Network on WNZK AM 690 radio in Michigan, as well as on the YouTube channel at twoguysonpolitics.com. I'm Ray Hanania with co-host former Congressman Bill Lipinski, and we're together going to talk about several issues. In our first segment, we're going to talk about the Trump-Zelenskyy meeting that took place Sunday, December 28th at Mar A Lago on the Ukraine war. What happened there and where is it going? And then we're going to talk a little bit about, we'll transition to many of Trump's policies and maybe talk a little bit about the war in Venezuela. Why are we there? Why are we? Is it really because of drugs, or are we just trying to pursue regime change? Or did the president of Venezuela say something that upset Trump? And then in the second segment, we're going to take a look locally here in Chicago at Mayor Brandon Johnson and his war with the city council, and now the split with the unions, and who might be running for president, and what are the issues, and why would you want to run for president? Then we'll do a little detour and talk a little bit about taxation in Illinois, and we'll end it with the topic of Gaza. What's happening? It doesn't seem like it's in the news, but much has not changed. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back right after these messages. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski, and this is Two Guys on Politics. Hello, Raymond. How you been?
Bill, how are you? First of all, I hope you had a Merry Christmas, Happy Kwanzaa, and plus a Happy Hanukkah that was just before Christmas. It was a great holiday season. How was your Christmas?
My Christmas was very, very good, and I hope that everybody that celebrates Kwanzaa and also my good Jewish friends enjoyed their holidays.
Yes, and also we should mention about the Chicago Bears, right? They're on their way to the Super Bowl. They're like the 1985 Bears, right? Aren't they? They're really moving.
Oh, now, wait, hang on. The 1985 Chicago Bears were probably the greatest defensive football team in the history of the National Football League.
Defensive is the key word. You're right, defensive.
This team gave up 42 points yesterday in a 42-38 loss to the San Francisco 49ers. They got a great offense, but the defense is atrocious. Hopefully, though, they'll get it straightened out enough to win next week and then win a couple of games in the playoffs.
Now, we hadn't planned to talk about the Bears, but we should say a few words about them because they did lose to the San Francisco 49ers on Sunday. And the statistics, though, that I saw were phenomenal, that in the last 6 wins of the Chicago Bears were won during the last 2 minutes. And the one that's most memorable was 8 days ago, I think, when they played the Green Bay Packers, and the Packers were winning. They were within seconds from walking away with the victory, and they fumbled the kickoff, and then the Bears got an interception. Caleb Williams, the quarterback for the Bears, and again, I'm not a big sports guy, but I'm excited. It just shows you how important the Bears are when a non-sports guy is excited about the Bears. Seems like his best asset is throwing long touchdown passes, not short passes. He can't seem to get the first down like other teams, but he can sure throw that 50, 60-yard pass right into the end zone. What'd you make of the game with the Packers and then with the game last night against the 49ers?
I've been a Bear fan since 1946 when they beat the New York Giants 24-14 behind that great quarterback, Sid Luckman. All right, now we come up to today. I think the Bears have a splendid offensive team. Their head coach, Ben Johnson, is an offensive-minded person. He's done a great job. I think our quarterback has the potential of being a Hall of Famer. But you are absolutely correct. He has trouble with the shorter
Yeah,
pass. He also has trouble when the game does not hang in the balance. He
yeah,
seems to be a little bit too nonchalant at that particular time. Now, when the game is on the line, he's fantastic. He can throw him 25 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards, right to the receiver. Very, very successful. The game against the Packers, he did a great job. He did a great job Sunday against
yeah,
the 49ers. He
yeah,
was never intercepted. He didn't fumble the ball. We were on the Packers 7 yard line, no, excuse me, the
yeah,
49ers 7 yard line. And we had 2 plays to get the ball in the end zone. If we had, we would have won that game.
yeah,
Unfortunately,
yeah.
both passes were not exactly on target.
Right.
Okay. Why? Because they were under 7 yards. Under 7 yards, he's not the greatest passer in
You're
the
right.
world.
You're right.
Okay. If it
They
was
should have.
25 or 30, we would have had a better shot at winning that game.
If there had been a foul that pushed us back 20 yards, you're absolutely
Right.
right. We probably would have won the game.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
we were so close and we couldn't get that extra 4 yards or 5 yards to get a touchdown, which would have won the game because the Bears were so close. The Bears started out by stealing and getting a touchdown. They intercepted and got a touchdown in the
Right.
first 10 seconds or 20 seconds of the game.
15 to be exact.
I think
Yes.
15 seconds. So
Yes.
and then the 49ers would come back, and then the Bears would catch up, and then the 49, and then we messed up, and then the 49ers, every time the 49ers had the ball, they almost every time in the beginning, especially, they got a touchdown. We messed up one time, and we were behind them, always catching up to them, but we came through pretty well. That was one of the highest scores in a football game I've seen in a long time. It was amazing. 42-38. All we
No,
needed
no
was that
question
one
about it.
touchdown. All right. So much for the excitement and
That's right.
fun of talking about sports. Let's go back to the ugly side of the world and talk about politics, Bill.
Okay.
We're talking about the war in Ukraine. Zelensky returned for a meeting with Trump. I'm not sure how many meetings he's had, but it was quite different from the meeting he had back in February, where Trump and his gang of cabinet members beat up on Zelensky, yelling at him, threatening him, making all kinds of stuff. And it was a shock, I think, to the world. But they did have a meeting yesterday at Mar A Lago, and it seems like Zelensky, I think, wanted some guarantees from the U.S. that if he makes peace, it'll be a real peace. He wants 50 years. I think Trump wants only 15 years. Personally, I think if you can just get us past Trump, Ukraine might do well. So I'd be happy for a 4 year truce. I think that might help change the situation. But I didn't see anything of any substance come out of that. Do you think, and did any substance come out of that meeting with Trump and Zelensky yesterday, Sunday?
No, I saw nothing substantive come out of it. They spent 2 hours talking. The Ukrainian and the American individuals working on getting a peace have spent a lot of time in the last 2 or 3 weeks coming up with various proposals, various ideas. The president talked to Putin for 2 hours before that meeting. Putin continually tells him that he wants to have a peace deal. He wants to end the war, but he doesn't do anything substantive to really do that. I
Right.
think that Putin is playing Trump. He's just delaying, and he's hoping that eventually he wears down the Ukrainians. Now, number one sticking point is Eastern Ukraine.
Right.
20% of the country. About of that 20%, probably 15% is now occupied by the Russians. 5% the Ukrainians still hold. They hold that because the defensive positions there are fantastic. Okay, so it's been easy to defend that. Well, what the Ukrainians want to do is demilitarize that 20% of Eastern Ukraine. okay, uh, by using European troops to go in there and be the peacekeepers. The Russians would withdraw, the Ukrainians would withdraw. The Russians don't want to do that. The
Right.
Russians said they're not going to withdraw. They view the rest of the Europeans as their enemy. Why should they allow their enemy to come in and occupy that territory that they've given up so much treasure for in blood and money? Okay. So there's a sticking point there. How you resolve that, I really don't know. I'm surprised that the Ukrainians have moved that strongly, saying they would be willing to give up 5% of that territory that the Russians do not occupy just to get a peace treaty going and getting, peacemakers in there. That's one sticking point. Do you think they can resolve that, Ray?
Well, I think that's interesting because I think part of the problem is that Zelensky is being pushed into peace. I think peace talks in a war against a country that started a war against the West, a country like the Soviet Union, which I call Russia the Soviet Union today, because that's what it really is. They're trying to reestablish themselves. Putin is a tyrant, he's a war criminal. He started a war because he wanted territory. He believed they were going to take over in 3 days. And now here we are, what, 3 years? Going on 3 years, and he has taken some land, but this is embarrassing for Russia. And instead of looking at it as a defeat of the Russians, we're the ones that are submitting because of Trump. He wants us to make a peace accord with Putin, and it's almost like we're surrendering to this tyrant just to make a peace, to make Trump look good. And I think that because of that pressure, I think Zelensky realizes, the United States, if they're not behind Ukraine 100% against tyranny and standing up for democracy the way we claim, then he's going to lose. And it's not enough just to have the Europeans and NATO, although I got to say, given everything that's happened during this war, the Ukrainians have stood up. They're strong. They fought the war far better than anybody expected or anticipated. But this isn't about the war. This is about President Trump. This is about President Trump, who said he could end the war in 24 days. His ego is on the line. He's self-centered. He wants to do something that makes him look good, and he doesn't care what the cost is, to the Ukrainian people who have been murdered and killed by Russia. He attacks cities. He doesn't care what this does to NATO. President Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care what it does to the Western nations in Europe. This guy is a danger to democracy and to Western survival. And this example with Putin, if Putin gets any kind of peace accord, even if it's just, okay, let's make a demilitarized zone of those three areas that they got, the Luhansk and, on eastern Ukraine. I think it's a defeat for the West. It's a defeat for us. But Trump will be able to turn that into a hotel in Moscow and in St. Petersburg after he leaves office, if he's forced to leave office by living up to the U.S. Constitution.
Well, I guess.
Do you think I'm too harsh? I mean, really?
No, 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 I don't think that you're too harsh. But I assume that your answer to my question is no, you don't think that we're going to be able to resolve that problem on eastern Ukraine because of the position that the Ukrainians have and the position that the Russians have, unless we get Trump to fully be behind the Ukrainians, or unless Trump just sells out the Ukrainians and sides totally with Putin. So I think that's going to be a very difficult stumbling block to get over. Now, another one is, the nuclear power plant that is in the Ukraine, but it's in the Ukraine where the Russians have occupied now for about a year and a half. The Russians also occupy that nuclear power plant. Now, the Ukrainians have offered to share the power plant with the Russians, that both the Ukrainians and the Russians would operate the power plant. But the Russians say, no, no, no. We occupy it. It's part of the territory that we won. The power plant now belongs to us because it was built by the Soviet Union back when there was the Soviet Union. We are the direct descendants of the Soviet Union, so it should be our power plant. Well, the Ukrainians can't accept that because that nuclear power plant at one time generated an awful lot of energy for the Ukraine. They're not going to want to have the Russians standing next to a Ukrainian trying to conduct, that power plant. So that's a very, very bad sticking point. I don't know how you resolve that. And unless Trump is willing to really go strongly with sanctions, okay, against Russia, I just don't see how Russia gives in on these points. And as far as Europe goes, Putin is now talking like Europe is a hostile force wanting to destroy Russia. The Europeans haven't done anything to try to destroy Russia. If anything, it's been the other way around. And Trump doesn't see, he still, goes after the Europeans every once in a while because he feels the Europeans aren't doing enough. Maybe they're not doing enough. But by the same token, if I was a European looking at this situation in the way Trump is being played by Putin, I don't know how much I'd want to get involved in this situation, defending the Ukraine. Because in my mind, I think Trump may turn around and walk out the door tomorrow and say, I give up.
Yeah, because I listen, I really think Trump is protecting Putin. He's trying to keep the door. It's obvious, in my opinion, that Trump is trying to keep the door open to Putin, that he wants his relations with Putin to be undamaged by this. He wishes the Ukraine war would go away so he can continue his relations with Putin. And by the way, just for listeners, when I think of Ukraine and nuclear power, I think of two places. Zaporizhia, I think, is the one that they're fighting over right now,
Yes.
right? They're negotiating or talking about. I'm not sure if we can call it negotiations. But the one that really comes to mind was the Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Ukraine, which obviously had that explosion and collapse and is a disaster. I don't know if I trust the Russians with any nuclear power plant. And I don't think the West should trust the Russians with a nuclear power plant. It's very concerning that we are not doing what we should be doing. You don't go in to negotiate. I mean, it seems to me that it's a fundamental of war that I've seen over the years, how the United States has won wars, and we've been the leader of the free world, and we've been able to defeat the evil doers, or whatever you want to call them. It's by being strong and by forcing peace on an aggressor, not by negotiating for peace with an aggressor. That's a sign of weakness, because if Putin says, wow, look what I got, it may have cost me 1 million soldiers, but he doesn't care. Russia is huge. It has a lot of resources. He wants to, his ego is as big as Trump's. And I think the two of them see eye to eye on self-centered policies. I'm worried that if I want to see these agreements fail, because I don't think a peace agreement is in the best interest of the United States. I think long term, it hurts us. It makes Russia more powerful. It sends the wrong signal to China, which I think is a big threat also. They've made moves just this past week on Taiwan. They're doing this military buildup. At any moment, what if they decide to attack Taiwan? What are we going to do? Call the president of China and say, hey, let's negotiate? Well, to me, it's like, wow, what a transformation of weakness for this country in terms of our leadership.
Well, another problem that we have with a possible peace deal is that the Ukrainians want guarantees of security for their country or whatever is left of their country. Now, who are they going to get these guarantees from? the United States of America, and the other
Right.
European nations. Now,
Right. But they're asking, Bill, aren't they asking for guarantees because they're being forced to into a peace accord? I mean, they're saying they
absolutely. No,
don't
no,
believe Russia's going to agree to peace. They don't trust them.
no question about it. But the Europeans and the United States should be able to give him whatever guarantees he's looking for. Russia has no part in that. You
Right.
know, they should say to Zelensky, what do you want from us? Okay, we'll give that to you. You've got your guarantees. But we haven't done that. That's been going on for 6 or 8 months. I don't know what we're waiting for there. What we're waiting for is just because Putin just refuses really to accept anything other than to talk nice with Trump when Trump calls him or when Trump brings him here and rolls out the red carpet for him. Putin has not given an inch on anything whatsoever.
Right. He hasn't. And you know, the other point that really kind of bothers me that we need to really worry about was Putin put together a 28-point peace plan earlier in the year. It was 28 points. He gave it to Trump. Trump looked at it, agreed to most of it, almost all of it, actually. And then it didn't go through because when the world heard what that 28 points was, it was basically surrender to the Russians. It was written by Putin. Now, so Trump changed it a little bit. He reduced it to 20 point peace plan, but it hasn't really changed. It still comes down to a basic surrender. I am so worried about NATO. You know, I know that there's this, we've been conditioned into believing that we are funding NATO and we are funding Europe and what Western Europe nations that are part of NATO. But I have to tell you that I think that's something we have to do. We are the leader of the free world. We have an obligation to lead and support those countries. If we abandon those countries, what are we? What does that leave us with? If we show that we're not going to stand up for them, anybody could take over Europe, and then it'd be like turning over Europe to the Nazis, a new form of fascism. That's what scares me. That if we don't stand up, we're going to end up just the way we were in World War II, where we were forced to go to war. We didn't want to go to war. We tried to stay out of the war, and then the Japanese attacked us, and we had no choice, and we had to enter the war. And it took us 4 years to defeat the Japanese and then the Germans, and at a huge cost to this country. When if we would have stood up in the beginning, it might have been we might have been able to stop all that in the beginning too.
Okay, I can't argue with any of that, Ray. I'm not an
And it's not our,
isolationist.
it's not
I
a, go ahead.
I believe that the United States of America is the leader of the free world. And if you're going to continue to be the leader of the free world, you're going to have to stand up and you're going to have to make some very tough decisions. And you're going to have to be willing, to tell an evil person such as Putin, this is what you're going to get, and you're not going to get any more. And we're going to put more sanctions on you, and we're going to give the Ukrainians more weapons to fight you. I would just want to say it is my belief underneath the Biden administration and underneath the Trump administration, we have given the Ukrainians just enough to deter the Russians from moving further and further into the Ukraine.
Yeah.
But we have not given them enough to win this war.
I
We
think
like
that
them leading the Russians, but we don't want them to make the Russians too mad because we don't want the Russians attacking Poland or Lithuania or Estonia or Latvia. Well, I think we've got to take the chance on that because that's the only way to stop a tyrant. We could have stopped Adolf Hitler when he wanted to take over Czechoslovakia,
right,
and we didn't. We should have
right.
stood up to him then. So I
And we
agree with
and yeah, we didn't get into that war. We should have got into World War II sooner, and we might have prevented it from going on as long. And I think you're right. I think that it worries me. We can't just give Ukraine enough to maintain equilibrium to stop the Russians from taking over. That's not enough. They
No.
have to defeat the Russians. I'm not saying to take over Russia, but there is a way to step this up and cause such a price to the Russian people that they're going to say, oh my gosh, we need to stop the war. And who knows, maybe Russia would turn things around. As it is now, Russians are looking at Putin going, wow, Putin's manipulating Trump. He's manipulating the West. He's a powerful person. I think they're starting to admire him. And instead of looking at him saying, he's dragging us down the tubes. All right. I think unless there's anything more to say about this horrible
Yeah, I'm trying to
Ukraine
think if
war.
there's any other issue that uh,
Well, we
yeah, well,
have.
the Russians and the Ukrainians have somewhat agreed upon having a vote in the eastern Ukraine region, whether they want to be with the Ukrainians or want to be with the Russians. Well,
Yeah,
the Russians occupy 20% of that, okay?
right.
Uh, 20% of the country over there. They occupy about 90% of where the vote will take place. Do you really think we're going to have a free and open
No,
election?
no, no.
I don't know.
I think the tough position is to reject that and tell the
Absolutely.
Russians go back to the what the boundaries were, withdraw all your troops, stop the war, and then maybe we'll sit and talk about how we can help the Russians and Putin. That should be our position, not surrendering anything or allow Putin to take anything. We were going to talk a little bit about the war in Venezuela. We don't have to do much, maybe a couple minutes. But this is another quagmire in my mind. It's very perplexing that Trump has started this war with Venezuela. It literally is a war that hasn't reached the headlines because we're at war with Ukraine. You know, the peacemaker, Donald Trump, who wanted the Nobel Peace Prize, he's probably going to take over the Nobel unit the way he did the Kennedy Center and put his name on it. It'll be the Donald J. Trump Nobel Peace Prize before you know by the end of the year. But he is not, there's no, it just shows how I don't want to criticize the American people given all the knowledge that we have, that we so easily believe that Venezuela is a major drug trafficker when every source says they're the least and smallest drug trafficker into the not just the United States, but into Central America, that the biggest drug traffickers are Mexico. That's number one. And number two is Colombia. They're the second largest drug traffickers into the United States. Why are we fighting with Venezuela? There are all these countries that are bringing in drugs. The other ones are Salvador, Costa Rica, Guatemala. There's so many countries that are on this list of where the drugs come from. Venezuela is at the bottom. So the truth is, it's not about drugs. I mean, do you believe that our war with Venezuela is about drugs?
No, I believe it's about oil. That's what I believe it's about. You have to remember that prior to the socialists taking over the government in Venezuela, it was a capitalistic country. And
Yes.
all the oil refineries, all the oil
Oh,
companies drilling for oil were American companies.
absolutely.
Okay. And
Absolutely.
when the socialists took over, they got rid of the Americans. Okay. So there are still a lot of people in this country that had invested in the drilling and the refining of oil in Venezuela. And they still would like to get that back. So the best way to get it back is have regime change in Venezuela and do a few other things with the CIA and make sure that an individual who believes in capitalism and believes in America helping out the Venezuelans with their oil become the president of Venezuela. I believe that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I know Venezuela personally because as a young person, my mother's family, when they fled the war in Palestine in 1948, her family from Bethlehem, the Christians, went to Venezuela. A lot of Christians went to the South American countries. Venezuela was a big one. So I had a lot of relatives, and every year I would go there for the summer. And one of my aunts married a man who was involved with the oil companies. Another Arab American, Assad Sharash was his name. And He was involved with the oil companies. And at the time, you could see how important those American owned oil companies were to the Venezuelan economy because a lot of the company people lived in Venezuela, they profited. And it was amazing because it was interesting because it was one place where Jews and Arabs actually got along because they controlled Venezuela. They were in the oil industry. We would meet them all. But I think that caused a resentment among the native Venezuelan people that they would see these outsiders come, take their resources. It was just a bad policy that I think pushed us into a bad situation. You're right,
I
the
think that's true.
socialists stepped in. Maduro is a socialist. He did step in, but I think he stepped in for the right reasons. It's the wrong person that did it, and he brought some bad policies. But
Well,
that's another.
there was no middle class in Venezuela. You were either rich and powerful in the
That's
country and
true.
had certain privileges, or
That's
you were
true.
a peon. You were poor.
That's
Uh,
absolutely true.
that had to be changed.
And the rich were foreigners. The rich were Arabs. The rich were Jews. The rich were Americans. You'd see
And
some
Spanish.
Venezuelan, and yeah, and Spanish from Spain. You'd see some Venezuelans who were wealthy, but never to the point of these outsiders who were looked on as foreigners. And I think that's caused this problem that we have in Venezuela. And yet, in spite of all that, why are we in Venezuela? It's not Cuba. It's not like Castro. Castro was bringing missiles with the Soviets to attack the United States. What's Venezuela doing? All he does is he criticizes the U.S., saying that, oh, our policies are causing problems around the world. But he hasn't brought any missiles. He hasn't threatened the United States. He hasn't attacked us. He hasn't engaged in terrorism. And he's certainly not involved to the level that we claim he is in drugs. I'm sure there's some drugs that come from every country. But if we want to stop drugs, we should occupy Mexico. Why don't we invade Mexico? That would be 80% of all the drugs that come into this country. We would take control of and we could end it. But that's not what it's about, is it? This is about Trump and I think misguided policy. And it's
I
very
agree.
troubling. All right, Bill, let's take a break. And when we come back, let's shift gears and talk locally about Mayor Brandon Johnson, another socialist. Should we do to Brandon Johnson what we're doing to Venezuela, or should we find a better answer? I don't know. We're going to be right back right after these messages. Welcome back to Two Guys on Politics. Bill, we've shifted gears to another socialist issue, I guess, here in Chicago. Mayor Brandon Johnson. He is, listen, he was smart enough, though, when they passed the budget, the city council that's taken over for the first time in a long time. They're actually running Chicago, the city council, the people elected by the voters from all of the wards. Instead, he could have vetoed that budget, but and they wouldn't have had the votes to overcome it, I don't think.
Oh, I
But
disagree with you. I believe the reason that he didn't veto it was simply because he knew that the alderman had the votes to override it. It would have been another
e-
defeat for him.
even though it didn't pass by I
No,
think
it did not.
he needed 36 votes. It passed by 34 votes. You think that some of the people who voted against it would have switched sides and overrode his veto?
Absolutely. In fact, I'm pretty sure that they were on record saying that they wouldn't vote for this budget, but they were not going to vote with the mayor to overturn it.
So that's why Brandon Johnson basically said, I'm not going to sign. I think he said he's not going to sign it, right? It went
Correct.
in. It went in. He didn't want to be identified with it, but he wasn't able to do much about it.
No,
What
he was not.
what concerns me about the city of Chicago is that, and you and I have been involved in Chicago in so many years. You were a Democratic committeeman in a Chicago ward, and an alderman in a Chicago ward, and a congressman representing a predominantly Chicago district. I covered Chicago City Hall 20 years, and I've covered it since leaving City Hall. There are the problems in Chicago continue to get worse and worse. There doesn't seem to be a solution to any of the problems. You could calm them down and make them hurt less, but we can't seem to solve them. I don't see a solution to that. Well, I mean, what does a mayor do to address these problems of taxation, crime? You could make crime look like it's not as bad as it was. You know, they say today, oh, inflation is it's down. Oh yeah, but inflation raised our prices 50%. It's the prices that are the problem now, not inflation. And in the city of Chicago, it's still crime. It's not as bad as it was, but it's still a major issue. Transportation is still terrible. What do you do? What does a guy like Brandon Johnson do? How does he become a good mayor? What does
Well,
he have to do?
I think it's too late for Brandon Johnson. He lost the vote in the city council. I cannot remember the last time that a mayor of the city of Chicago lost a vote in the Chicago City Council. So he has lost control of the council. Now, I don't think that's a bad idea because according to the city charter, the city council is really supposed to run the city of Chicago. They have been cowered into not doing so because there were strong mayors who used contracts and patronage to get aldermen to be in line. So I'm very happy to see the aldermen speaking up, taking
Right.
over and doing what they really are supposed to do. Now, ironically, the news media, who has for years and years said the city council has not been doing their job. The city council just rolls over. The city council is a stamp. Now that they stood up to the mayor and defeated the mayor on the budget, now they're saying the city council is out of control. You know, what are they doing? I mean,
Yeah.
that news media
Listen,
is one of the most hypocritical entities we
I
have
think
in this country.
I think we've always known the news media is hypocritical, that the news media is there. They're not there to cover good stories. They're there. They want controversy. And honestly, as a journalist for many years, nobody read my happy stories about walking a little old lady across the street with the Boy Scout. What they do read is people are killed, fires destroy homes, and Chicago politics fails to stop crime and murder in the city of Chicago. The only good thing about what's happening in the city of Chicago is, and I guess it's not really a good thing, but in a psychological way, it's a good thing. It takes away the focus from the suburbs where they have so many problems that nobody focuses on because the media is a third of what it used to be. They don't have the space for it. And all the problems of Chicago are spreading into the suburbs. What we see in Chicago happens in our own communities and it varies. It's like a checkerboard and it's bad.
Well, besides losing control of the city council, the mayor has lost control of the Board of Education. The mayor also has caused a rift in the labor movement, which
Yes.
really put him into office. Some people still support him, but a lot of people no longer support him. So without being able to control the city council, without being able to get what he wants with the Board of Education, without having labor's endorsement, I don't see how he can regain a position of authority to straighten out the city of Chicago. I believe we need to find an individual who can work not only with labor, but also with business. We need to have business in the city of Chicago because we need to cut down the taxes that the ordinary citizen is paying in the city of Chicago, because so many of them are getting up and leaving Chicago, leaving Cook County, leaving the state because of all the oppressive taxes in moving to Northwest Indiana. They still continue to work in Chicago, but they pay their taxes in Northwest Indiana. That's not good. Perhaps we need a businessman who also is an individual that can get along with labor to be elected mayor of the city of Chicago. Because certainly the last few mayors we have had have not been very successful.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I just want to say the unions have always been divided. The SEIU and the Chicago Teachers Union have always been on one side. the American Federation of Labor and the Chicago Federation of Labor have always been a little more conservative. And personally, I like all the unions. I'm a big union supporter. I was a member of the unions, and I hate to see those problems. But you're right also about the population. It's resulted in a drop of, we used to be the second city. That's our nickname.
Right.
Chicago is nicknamed the second city, and yet we're not the second city. We're the third city. It's New York City and Los Angeles are number one and number two,
And
followed by
Houston's coming up
Chicago.
fast.
And yeah, I was just going to say,
Yeah.
Houston is right on our tail. We've gone from 3 million in Chicago down to, we've lost 300,000 people over the years. And we are no longer the city that we claim to be. And I think that's part of the problem. I think what we need to do, my solution to the problems in Chicago has to be this. We have to start looking at Chicago not just as a city by itself, but as a city that's part of the county. And we need to combine the county and the city into a consolidated government. I think we need to consolidate government in the suburbs. We got too many government agencies that are charging us money like crazy, and we need to make Chicago part of the suburbs, and we have to control it with influence from the suburbs over Chicago, because what happens in Chicago spreads out into the suburbs, and we pay the price in crime, in taxes, in our property values. It's horrible. In fact, one of the topics we were going to talk about are the taxes that keep going up. One of the reasons why taxes keep going up in Illinois, which is the number one state with the highest taxes in the country, it fluctuates between number one and number two out of 50 states. So even if we say number two, we're bad. But one of the reasons is because Chicago continues to drag us down. Chicago can't get a hold of its costs and spendings, and we have to continually pass laws to boost up and support Chicago, transportation, education. These are huge. If we don't consolidate and try to take over, I think we're going to drag this whole region down into some type of economic collapse. I'm really worried about it because people leaving Chicago aren't moving into the suburbs anymore. They're moving into Indiana, where the taxation level is so far less. You actually are going to boost your income by moving there. You're going to actually live there. I'm worried about that. And my taxes in the suburbs are horrific. And while I can blame the county, I blame it on Chicago first.
Well, I think that we should have a consolidated government, one entity that is the city of Chicago and the county of Cook.
Yes.
Okay. They should be totally put together because they have mutual interests. If Cook is going to succeed, the city has to succeed, and vice versa. So we should get rid of the city boundaries, make it one entity, let all of the citizens participate in it. It'd be one entity. I think that is the way we can start rolling back these taxes that are really crushing individuals that live in the state of Illinois. And I don't see why we don't consolidate the collar counties also. Frankly, we have too many governments.
Yes.
Which costs us too much money. There is so much duplication, throughout this state of Illinois, principally in northeastern Illinois, but throughout the state. We don't need all these governments. We could, consolidate many of them. Thereby, they would have less employees. They would have to collect less money in order to pay their employees. That's the way to go. I'm very, very happy you brought that up, Ray. I don't know if we can ever get to that point, but it's certainly something that I think the news media should try to start championing.
Maybe that's something that you and I should start uh, pushing, because honestly, every solution they propose for Chicago has failed. It doesn't work. Consolidating the governments might save Chicago. and might prevent the suburbs from continually having to bail out Chicago. It's just a horrific situation. That's one of the reasons why, by the way, I support Maria Pappas, who's a Cook County treasurer. She's a county official. She's running for mayor of Chicago. I think what we need to see is a county official become the mayor of Chicago and then push this idea because nobody is talking about it. You and I are the first two people to talk about how do we merge Chicago and county government into one government, reduce all these little government agencies that are nitpicking us with taxes to death. It's killing people. I think that, and again, that's my personal preference, but I think the idea of bringing county government into Chicago to take over Chicago, maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe the president of the Cook County Board should be president of Cook County and Chicago. And we don't eliminate the city council aldermen. Maybe they still run their wards, but they do it in conjunction with the suburban areas also. One government. I mean, there's got to be a way to do this.
Well, I think that what we should do is get Raja behind this idea because he pushed and pushed and pushed, and he stopped those grocery stores from merging.
Yeah. According to his $20 million
pushed and pushed and pushed means, but I think it's an interesting thing for his supporters to say he pushed and pushed and pushed. No details on what push means, but he did it.
Well, when you look into it, somebody else introduced the legislation to kind of corral the grocery stores, and he voted for it. He supported it. But he has a $20 million campaign budget, which is another issue. We need to limit the amount of money that's spent on elections because money is what's defining leadership today, not issues. Raja is a great guy. I like the guy. He's a nice guy. I keep asking, what have you really done, Raja, besides tell me how to pronounce your name? I don't like that. What did you really do with the grocery tax? His budget is so good. He has a great commercials. I'm worried about his influence in the election coming up. I like Robin Kelly. I've already said this before. She's a congresswoman from the South Side who is running. And Juliana Stratton is a good person. She's lieutenant governor, but I don't think she has the experience to be a leader. But I think Raja represents the continued existing situation. And if he gets elected, it's just going to continue what's been happening in Chicago, the six-county region, and the state. We need a new direction, I think.
I agree. And I don't think Raja, the pusher, is the direction to go in.
And that's not a personal thing. Raja is a good guy, right? I mean, he's smart, but leadership is about what have you done, right? What did you really do? And I don't think he's answered that question. I think Robin Kelly has. But I also think, and just going back to Chicago, the mayoral election, which is the primary in February 23rd, 2027. We're still about a year away from this spring. It'll be a year, and we're going to we'll see everybody start coming out, and it'll be a big cast of candidates. Let's say there might be 12, like there was last time for the mayoral election that Brandon won. There was a runoff. If nobody gets 50% of the primary correct, the two highest vote getters go into a runoff. And Brandon was one of the two with Paul Vallis, who I thought would have made a great mayor. But I think racial politics played a lot in undermining Paul. But going into this next election, I don't think Brandon Johnson is going to get one of the top two votes in that election. What do you think?
Well, certainly if the election was held today, even though I don't know who's the candidate going to be besides
right.
What's her name?
Maria Pappas.
Yeah, Maria Pappas.
Mike Quigley is talking about. He said he was.
Yeah, I don't think that Brandon can get into the runoff. I really do not.
Especially if there are 12 candidates, it could be that he's going to be out.
Correct. Well, it depends upon how many African-American candidates there are. Unfortunately, the city of Chicago, is so racially divided. It is very difficult to find a candidate that can win the majority of the Black, Hispanic, and white vote in the city of Chicago at the present time.
Yeah, that's the real racism that we have. It's not a personal racism, it's a political racism, the way people vote and stuff. Blacks vote almost 90% plus in terms of their voting strength. Hispanics are low, 24 to 25%. Whites are very high voting also, but not, I think blacks, which are a smaller population than whites, obviously, whites produce more votes, but they have a lower turnout too. And I think that's because a lot of whites are just disgusted with what's happening. Hispanics just don't vote. I think because of the immigration policies and fear of immigration, they think if they vote, they're going to expose their family or an undocumented relative or an illegal alien to be identified and be arrested. So African Americans do have the power to change things. And I think, unfortunately, you're going to see 6 or 7 African Americans run for office. I think you're right. Brandon Johnson will probably come off as the weakest of the bunch. But I don't know who those candidates are going to be. It's going to be interesting to see who's going to pop up. But my money is Maria Pappas. I've known her since the 90s. I've worked with her. I worked on her first campaign. I worked with her when she was a Cook County commissioner. I think she's smart. She's a little erratic, the way she comes across, but she's very smart and she's done a lot of good stuff. We were
I'll
going to
keep
talk
my
about,
own
go ahead.
counsel at the present time.
Pardon me?
I said I will keep my own counsel at the present time.
Okay. Listen, finally, obviously the county needs to do something about taxation. I think Fritz Kagi is the assessor, and I think he's in trouble. He's being challenged by Pat Hines, who was a nephew of Tom Hines, who was a county assessor for years. Pat Hines worked in the assessor's office for 20 years before becoming part of the Cook County assessor's office, where he was working in the Cook County assessor's office before leaving in 2021 and becoming the Lyons Township assessor. He is running against Fritz Kagi. I think Pat Hines offers the best opportunity to change how assessments are being done. And assessments, as you know, drive the value of your home and therefore drive the value of the property taxes that are imposed on your home. Those taxes sometimes are artificial, and there needs to be a better system.
I'm with Pat Hines all the
Yeah,
way.
so am I. All right, final word. Anything else on the city before we shift to a minute on Gaza, which nobody seems to hear about, but we're paying for, you and I, in our taxes.
No, I can't think of anything else, but I would like to have an update on Gaza because unfortunately, the mainstream news media no longer seems to be interested in covering anything about Gaza. Why, I don't really know, but that happens to be the case. If you ask me, I would say, well, there's a peace treaty, so I guess nothing's going on there. But tell us, you stay on top of that. What is the situation now?
Well, Trump claims that there is a peace treaty. He's going to be meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I think today or tomorrow or this week sometime. And they say that there's a peace accord, but there is no peace accord. What it is perception is reality. And Trump wants you to believe that, hey, they keep saying, for Trump, this is a peace victory. It's about Trump. He says, I brought peace to the Middle East. He needs these Arab countries, which are big investors in his family business. He needs them to stand with him, and he has to come across like he's fair. And the way to do that without abandoning Israel is to say, look, I brought peace. I brought all the hostages home. The hostages, the majority, except for one, I think, the body of one has been returned. But we don't have peace. The Israelis are attacking Gaza every day. And the fatalities range between 20 to 50 people every day are dying there. And the media never covered Gaza from the Arab perspective. They always covered it from the pro-Israel perspective. I blame the Arabs for that. They don't understand how to promote their issues the way the pro-Israel movement knows how to do that. But I think it's bad for Israel. I think this war is bad for Israel. I think they need to end the war. I think they have to get rid of Netanyahu. If you want Israel to exist for the next 50 years, there has to be change now because all the things that are being done today are going to come back to haunt Israel very quickly in a very, very bad way. There's no way you can get rid of anger and emotion in Gaza. And unfortunately, we don't have a president who is going to stop this war. He wants you to think he's stopping the war so he can qualify for a Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, I appreciate the update. I'm
All
glad
right.
to see that it was objective and not one-sided.
Yeah, listen, I'm pro
We don't, I know. I'm with you.
I'm against extremism and I support moderation. I'm against extremist Arabs and against extremist Israelis. And it's hard to argue that because in this country, it's so weighted in favor of Israel that anything you say critical of the Israeli government looks bad. And they want to pass a law to attack us and silence us. And that's what's happening. You don't see it in the media anymore because social media has been suppressed by a censorship that I think is bad for our country. Anyway, I think we've touched on a lot of issues. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski, and this is Two Guys on Politics, and we'll see you next week.
And have a happy new year, everybody. And we wish you the best. Thank you for listening to us. We'll talk to you again. Bye bye, everybody.